All right, so it should be recording now. Okay, so thank you all for joining today. We're going to talk about Google Meets, kind of walking through some of the different ways you can use it in the classroom, whether we're doing e-learning or other settings, and some of the different settings within a Google Meet call, how to start one, toggle settings on and off, what it looks like for your students when they join, and then also just some general tips and etiquette ideas that you can kind of teach students if you plan on using this resource in your learning environment. So you probably use some type of video conference tool, I would guess, when we were doing extended e-learning quite a bit. But if you haven't used Google Meet, now is the time to learn, right? So you have this time in the summer to do that. So ideally, by the end of this session, our goals are to learn how to use Meet to connect with students, to conference, maybe bring in guest speakers or outside speakers into your classroom, and to practice using some of those settings. So we will have some time here for me to show you some tools, and then for you to practice and apply them as you like. And the slideshow, I'll just warn you now, I make slides for my sessions, but as I get going, I'll probably toggle in and out of my slides and go into actual Google Meet itself. But I did put screenshots of all the different steps of starting a Meet, using the settings, muting students, unmuting, using the chat within the slide. So it's kind of like your paper reference per se on the things I'll show you when I'm actually in the tool itself. So what is Google Meet? It is a video conference tool. It supports video, audio, and text. So if a student joins a Google Meet, they don't necessarily have to have their video camera on. It's kind of similar to a Zoom in that you can have just audio or you can do text only. They have some flexibility in that. It is available to all of our BCSE staff and our students. You can have up to 250 people in a Meet call. In years past, Google Meet was fairly new, and I was still in the classroom, but you could only have about 50 people in a call. And there were some people when we first started going into e-learning saying that couldn't support all of my students that I wanted to have in there, but they made some changes, and now you can have quite a few people in a Meet call. To join a Google Meet, you can join by calling in on your phone. So that's kind of nice for some of our students who tend to prefer to use their cell phone, or you can join via web link, similar to a Zoom in that sense. There are automatic closed captions that are available in a Google Meet, which is fantastic for giving some supports there for representation for our students. And you can also record a Google Meet as well. I will say that if you use closed captions in a Google Meet, if you record that Meet, it does not record those captions. So that's a little bit of a bummer. However, after you record a Meet, it saves automatically in your Google Drive. You can always upload that recording into YouTube, and then YouTube creates those closed captions if that's something you were worried about. I know some teachers did that during e-learning because they really wanted to give students the opportunity to have the ability to turn on and off those closed captions. So they would just upload that video into YouTube where it makes the closed captions for them. So important note here, just to clarify this. So we're using Zoom right now. Zoom is something that we have purchased for staff-to-staff communication. So for meetings, trainings like what we're doing, we'll be using it quite a bit during the UDL Institute for our different breakout rooms and sessions. Google Meet is the tool that's for communicating with students. So if you're having a video call with a small group or with your whole class, Meet is the tool to use for that. Zoom is for staff-to-staff. All right. Couple of details to know. We do have some specific security settings in place on Meet that are helpful to know these before I start showing you how to start them, because if you've maybe used Google Meet before on a personal Google account, the settings might look a little bit different. We have some safeguards down because we want to make sure our students are protected and can't just go creating their own Meet video conference calls with any random people. So only BCSE staff can create a Meet conference call. So a student can't make their own video conference call. Only staff members have the ability to do that. Staff can control who can enter a Meet. So the first time you use it with your students, you'll get a notification when they join. After that, if they've ever joined a Meet call, it remembers that they're a BCSE student and lets them in. But if you have someone who tries to join in from a non-BCSE account, then you can say, no, you're not allowed to be in my Meet call. This is for my students only. So you have some control over that. Staff can also control microphones in a Google Meet. So if you have a student who maybe forgets that they have some background noise in the background and everyone else can hear it and it's getting a little loud, you can mute their microphone for them and you can unmute them as well. Staff can also remove participants in a meet if need be. Staff can rejoin prior meet links. So if I schedule them out in advance and I have a meet that takes place every Thursday, I can always go back into that meet. Students can't reuse the same information. So every time you have a Google Meet and you want to keep having them with your students regularly, you have to make a new one each time. And that's just a security setting we have in place so that students can't go back into a call without a teacher being there. So teachers can recycle the links, students can't. It will bar them from being able to go back in. Staff members can record and save meets. Students can't record and save them on their end. And only a staff member can use the present mode, like what I'm doing right now. Students can't present their screen. Only staff members can do that. So if you're doing some type of conference with your students and maybe a group is presenting and they made slides and you want to show it to everyone else, students would need to send their slideshow to you and then you could present. They wouldn't be able to present that on their own. And that's just recommended settings that Google has, just so there's not any crazy things that can happen. So those are just some of the basic things we have in place and are helpful to know before we start with a meet. Questions over any of that?
Nope. So how did you do the presentation? Is this like a PowerPoint that you just incorporated into this?
Yep.
Or so it's just a regular PowerPoint you incorporated?
Yeah, and it's kind of similar with Zoom and Meet. Across the toolbar, I have it on the top right now, but in Meet, it's always on the bottom. You just click present, and then you select which window on your computer you want. So for me, I had my slideshow here. I clicked the tab that had it open, and then I just went into present mode, and then there we go. You can see it. All right, and I'm actually going to go into Meet now, and we're going to start from
where's the present mode? Where's that at?
I'm going to show you. We're going to go into a Meet right now so I can model that on my screen. All right. So to join and start a Google Meet, the fastest thing I always do is I pull up Chrome and I open a new tab. And over here where that little Google Apps, I call it the waffle menu. It has like all the little rectangles right there. It's beside your profile. You click there, it brings up all of the Google Apps. Otherwise, you can just type in meet.google.com and it'll show up there, but this is faster for me than typing it out. So I click the Google Apps menu and I scroll a little bit further down and Meet is right there. All right, and to start a meeting, you click where it says join or start a meeting, and you have to give it a nickname. Don't just click continue, give it a nickname. That way that when you leave the call, students can't get back into it, that the call is ended when the host leaves. So it can be something simple. You can use the same nickname over again. So for this one, I guess I'll just do. Then I click continue. So I give it a meeting name. You can do it by class period name if you want to. It's up to you. And then it brings up your microphone and camera settings right here. It's going to tell me camera failed right now because Zoom is using my camera when I'm on this webinar with you guys. But usually my camera would show up there and I have the ability to turn things on and off. Just a general tip here, every time I join a conference call, I either try to join muted or I mute myself right away so that I'm not disrupting what's being said and I don't want to be the one who joins the call and has really loud noise in the background. That's an expectation you can communicate with your students too. Always make sure they turn off their microphone before they click this join now button. So join now is what you would click to join the call. And I did put screen this in my slides too. All right, first thing that comes up is all of your join info. So I could copy all this join info, paste it in a message on It's Learning, paste it anywhere on It's Learning so my students can see it, and it shows them if they want to join by cell phone. This is the number they would call in, and they'd enter this PIN. Otherwise, they could just click this link and they could join there. If this window goes away and I say, oh no, I forgot to share the join information for my students, how do I get that back again? The bottom toolbar right here where I gave my video call a nickname, I'll click that, and my join info is right there again. All right, other settings in a Meet across the bottom here. I can turn on my microphone. I can turn on my camera if I want to. Here is where I can turn on and turn off closed captions. If you turn on closed captions in your presentation, you have to have your microphone on. Otherwise, it's not picking up when you're talking. And it does a really good job of tracking. I was testing with this to see if it created more accurate closed captions of what some other tools do, and it did a good job. It actually spelled out my name correctly, which usually never happens because my name's not usually recognized by any type of word processing software, and it did it. So it does a pretty good job. You can turn it on, turn it off. If I have my microphone on, I'm afraid it's going to give really bad feedback right now if I do that because I'm using my mic on this call with you, but it would just be across the bottom here. And your students have the ability to toggle that on and off as well. So if I wanted to present in a Meet, which is a question you had, Scott, present now is what I would click. And I could do my entire screen. I could do a window, a Chrome tab. I have options there.
And are you doing the entire screen right now?
Yeah, I always do entire screen just so I make sure that they can see everything, and I don't want to be able to see something on my screen and then no one else be able to see it. So I just do that by default, but it's up to you and what you want to do. All right. Other settings here. The 3-dot button in the corner are some additional settings. This is where you have the option to record your meeting. And when it records it, it automatically makes a folder in your Google Drive called Meet Recordings. So you can always go back there and look at them. It does take a long time to process those files. So if your meeting's pretty lengthy, it can take a couple of hours. If your meeting's hours long, then it might take overnight for it to process. So just know that going into it, it takes a little bit for that to work, but it does save in your Google Drive, which means that you can just get a shareable link and give that to your students. You do have the ability to change the layout in Google Meet too. So these are the different options. I could have the spotlight will show one person who's talking. Tiled allows you to see everyone on the call. So tiled is good if you're in a video conference with a bunch of students and you don't necessarily need to present your slides. You're just all looking and talking to each other there. The sidebar option is good for a presentation because it will put the presentation here in that big rectangle, and then the other participants would be over here on the side. Now you wouldn't be able to see everyone there because it only has a couple spaces, but you'd be able to see a few. Other options in this menu, you can switch camera. There's not really a need to do that unless maybe you're on a Meet call and you have your camera turned on and you realize that it's not showing your camera. It could have grabbed the wrong default one. That's where you can select it. Again, the ability to turn on and off captions. Settings just tells you what microphone on your device is selected and being used and what video is being used as well. So that's where you can double check that there is one selected. It'll grab those by default. So there's usually not an issue there, but sometimes if your computer's docked, you have to go through and change it. And those are pretty much the need to know settings there. Across the top is where you can see the participants in your Meet. So if I had other people here in the call, they would all be shown here. If maybe I'm just having a Meet call with a couple of students, I could just add them directly and they would get an invite via Gmail. It would show up in their email account. I could just type in their account there. I use this sometimes if I know I'm having a one-on-one with another staff member and I wanted to use Meet, I would just type in their name instead of sending the join information. So they just get a notification in their email. But this is where my settings would be. And I'm actually going to join this from my cell phone so you can see how you can mute other people in a call. All right. Join meeting. All right, there I am again. I'm in here twice. Okay. So over here, my participant menu, I can see the other me that joined the call on my phone. So this is where I have the ability to mute or unmute if I want. So I could click this person's name. They currently muted themselves right now, but I could unmute them if I need to. So I could pin them so that if I pin someone and they were showing video, then theirs would stay up here at the top. If I wanted to remove this person from the call, if I click their name, remove from meeting is how I would do that. And the only time you ever really have to use the remove from meeting is when your meet call is wrapping up. It's really important that the teacher is the last one who leaves, so the student isn't in there wondering, what am I supposed to do now? My teacher's not in here. So sometimes at the end of a meeting, what we had teachers do was teacher would tell the students, all right, call's done, go ahead and try to leave the meeting, and if you need help, then I can remove you from the meeting. So teachers would go through and just click that remove from meeting and get them out of the call. The chat box is right beside the participants. This is where you can share information. Or links and things like that. It's all visible there. And if you ever add a hyperlink, it shows up that way so they know where to click. And everyone has the ability to message in the chat. So students have the ability to do that too. And that's pretty much the gist of settings in a Meet. Whenever you're ready to leave a call, it is just this leave call hang up button across the bottom. Questions about what I just showed you?
No.
All right.
Fine.
No, we are good.
All right. I'm going to move back to the slides then. And we can look at more of the ideas for using Meet in the classroom. All right, and this is the screen after you leave a meeting. You as the teacher have the ability to rejoin the call. Students don't see that. The only thing that students see on their screen is return to home screen, which takes them here. And if a student clicks this button to join a Meet, they get an alert saying they don't have the ability to do that. So that's what that would look like. All right, a couple of things here and helpful resources if you want to use this tool in your classroom, some things to help you get started. So as with really using any new tool or hosting any type of discussion in class with your students, it's important to kind of set those boundaries on etiquette and expectations and how we communicate with others. So there are a lot of resources out there. These are just some ones that I pulled together and I found to be pretty flexible and helpful. But it's helpful to teach and model some video conference etiquette and expectations with students beforehand and give them this information before so they know when someone else is talking, I need to make sure I'm muted. And if I have something I want to contribute, then I can just say something in the chat and then my teacher can give me permission to unmute myself so we're not all talking over each other. So kind of like you would facilitate that in maybe an in-class discussion or debate, you could do that in a Meet as well. So there are a couple of examples here, and this first example I pulled from a blog, the Dish That Textbook blog, if you ever follow that one. And I linked a bunch of his stuff, but I liked this because it gives some good reminders for students, and they have it in multiple languages. So I linked those on here. It's in Spanish, it's in French, it's in Japanese. So if you have students who are ELL students in your learning environment, you could put this on there and just give students a general reminder on this is how we enter a call and these are my expectations for you. And then this English option too is just a Google Doc that you could make a copy of, edit, do whatever you may. Some schools during e-learning, I know, they made a copy of this one, but they tweaked it to where it had their school logo on it and they added their building specific PBIS language. So responsibility relationships, I'm bad for blanking on that first R at North, but that's what you could put to make it a little bit more specific to the language your students are already using in their learning environment. And those are, again, more screenshots of that. And they're linked there on my slides if you wanted to borrow and copy those and put them in your course. A couple other things here. The last few slides I have in this slide deck are really just to give you some ideas on how you can use video conferencing in any point during the school year. Given it definitely lent itself to remote learning, as we still wanted to be able to talk and communicate with our students. But there are opportunities where you can use Google Meet and video conferences even when you have students in your physical classroom. So it'd be great to use Google Meet maybe to record a lecture that you're doing or an in-class activity. You could set up a computer and record it there. You can do it for following up on missing assignments for students. Maybe if you have a student who is sick, you could schedule a call and just check in with them there. Really, it's another idea or option for class presentations, a way for students to present to the class, maybe in a different part of the building or a different part of the room. Read alouds to students too, that's a little bit more elementary, but that's what a lot of elementary teachers use this for, is a way to read aloud to students. Other ways of using it in the regular classroom, in a typical classroom setting, is you can use this for guest speakers. So maybe you have a lot of partners in the community who want to speak with your students and talk about their jobs or their careers, or to give a little bit more insight on a unit that you're studying, but it's really tricky to get them scheduled in to your classes. And especially for you guys who are all high school teachers on this call, you teach the same class multiple times, and sometimes it's hard to have a guest speaker come in and be there and do that same presentation multiple times in a row. So what you could do is have the guest speaker join a Google Meet. You could record that Google Meet, or maybe it's just easier for them to just join virtually a couple times during the day. That would be an opportunity for that. I know there was a teacher at North who did that last year. She used a Google Meet to have someone join their call, and they had a pretty cool experience with that person as a guest speaker. Virtual field trips as well. So field trips in the first semester aren't going to happen due to the pandemic and everything that's been going on. So if you're someone who had a field trip planned for your class, then maybe you could arrange with the location that you're having, where you would usually have that field trip, for them to still walk you through it. They can do a Google Meet on a cell phone, and they can walk you through and show you those different places. And that's a way for you to still have a little bit of that experience. Plus, it's great for communicating with families as well outside of school if you need to. Again, Meet is accessible on lots of different devices. So there's 12 ideas there, and there's a little bit more if you click this link. Those are just some examples of how you can use it in a couple of different classroom settings. And last thing here, this question came up quite a bit during e-learning, because we had lots of teachers who would write things out on their whiteboard in class and still wanted to have the opportunity to do that in video conferences with their students. There are a couple different things you could do here, and I linked examples and tutorials for all of these. If you like to use your whiteboard quite a bit and still want to be able to write, but don't necessarily have an iPad or a phone or something like that, and writing on the computer is tricky, and I totally get that, because if I try to use a pencil type of control on my computer, it's messy and it doesn't look the way I want it to. If you join a Meet call like I did with my computer, and then I also joined it on my cell phone, your cell phone could essentially be a doc cam. So I could point my cell phone at the paper that I'm writing on, and that's what students could see on that call. So that's kind of a way to demonstrate and visually show, kind of like a doc cam, but not have to worry about a digital whiteboard tool. So that's an option. Some teachers did that. It's a kind of a MacGyver way of giving yourself a doc cam at home, but you could join on another device and use that device as your doc cam. Other type of whiteboarding options here, these are digital whiteboard tools. Jamboard's a good one. It saves everything in your Google Drive. You can add pictures and post-it notes to it. You can share it with students so they can edit and work on it at the same time, and it automatically saves everything. You don't have to click the save button. Chrome Canvas is a little bit less dynamic than Google Jamboard. It's a less complicated version of it, I would say. You just it's similar concept. You can draw, put Post-its, but you don't have the same ability to share it with others. And it doesn't save in the same way that a Jamboard does. With the Jamboard, you can save it as a PDF, saves in Drive, Chrome Canvas, just always saves as a static picture. And this is one that I heard from another teacher. I have not used this tool a ton myself, but it's whiteboard.fi. And how you use this one is that you create a class, and it essentially gives all of your students their own whiteboard space. So if you create a class and you're demonstrating something to your students and you ask them to show their work, then they would all be writing on their own whiteboard, and you as the teacher would see them all working in real time. It is free, I do know that. And this one's a little bit more elementary, but the last one that's on here is Awe app, and it's just another digital whiteboard. Pretty plain and simple, similar to Jamboard. It doesn't save in Google Drive though. That's the only drawback on this one. But wanted to give you a couple options. If you're using a Google Meet in class, it's fun to kind of bring in some other tools there and combine different tech tools together. So you could use the Jamboard to be illustrating and showing students concepts and diagramming and mapping things out. You can also use different G Suite tools. So you can bring in a slideshow like what I'm doing right now and present that to students as you walk through and explain concepts. If maybe I'm working with a couple of students one-on-one and I want to give them feedback on a writing assignment, then I can pull up that writing assignment and explain my thinking to them in a video conference. I could also host a classroom game on Kahoot, and my students could join in on different devices there. And again, those are a little bit more for a remote teaching and learning experience, but could be used with students other times as well. There are some new features that I don't have an ETA on this, but I would anticipate they would be in place by mid-August, hopefully sooner. I know that Google is working to add these soon, but there are going to be some changes to Google Meet that would make it a little bit more comprehensive, and so that you don't have to rely on lots of extensions or outside tools to get some of these fun features. They're adding a piece into Google Meet where Jamboard is a part of Google Meet. It's a button that you would turn on, and then a Jamboard pulls up, so you have that little whiteboard, which is pretty cool. The other one is that Google Meet is adding a feature where you can have breakout rooms. So if you want students to be able to work in smaller groups on a Google Meet, you click the breakout room and it can randomly assign them, or you can figure out the groups beforehand, but it puts them in their own Google Meet calls. And again, this is new, so I don't know what that's going to look like yet, but this is all on their roadmap. More meeting moderation controls. So we have a lot of these settings in place. This number 3 is more for schools that didn't put the same security settings in place as we did, but it basically just gives you more control on muting and unmuting participants, but we already have that set up for us. Background blur and replace basically gives you the ability to add a fun, goofy background to a Meet call. You currently can't do that unless you add on some other websites and software. This would have that built in already. And then the raise your hand feature. So some teachers have found a workaround on this and added an extension that does it, but essentially they're adding this feature into Meet so that students could raise their hand, the little raise hand button in a Google Meet call, and it would notify the host, which would be the teacher, that someone wants to say something. And then putting in real-time polling and questions into a Meet as well. You use Zoom pretty often, which is what we're using right now for this training. A lot of these features are built into Zoom already. Zoom is Google Meet's biggest competition, so they're adding in all of those features that people want to be in Meet that Zoom has, so they can probably compete a little bit better. But those will be coming soon. And then the last 2 things on here are just some resources as well. You're using Meet for virtual meetings. Even if you host department meetings or help organize that, there's just some tips on here that I wanted to share in case you wanted them. And then any guides that you want here as well. And the 2 that I really want to draw your attention to are these second and third one. I made this partway through its learning and e-learning, and I wish I would have made it sooner, but only so many hours in a day. What this is it's a student geared help guide. So this is showing students, this is how you join a Google Meet call. This is what that looks like. So it's just a helpful guide for students. So I make lots of guides for teachers on how to use tools, trying to do better about making the guides for students now too. And that's exactly what this guide is. So this is something that you could make a copy of this Google Doc if you want, that I have linked here, or you could just use this one. You could put this link in your It's Learning course and tell students, anytime you have a question about a Google Meet, use this guide to help you get started. And we also have it in Spanish as well. The wonderful Cultural Learning Center at North helped me translate this one and got that good to go. So we have it in both languages. And that's pretty much it. So now is the time for you to practice and play and ask any questions if you have them.
So to schedule them, do you go through the calendar? Is that how you schedule it?
Yeah, that's always what I've done. So I just go to my Google Calendar, and I can show you that actually. I don't know why I stopped sharing right when I was about to show you something. All right. Okay, so if I want to set one for tomorrow, today, my event info comes up. And add my time. If I wanted to directly add people there, I could, and they would just see this event on their Google Calendar. But to add in the Meet conferencing, all I do is just click there, and it automatically puts join information on this calendar event. So I always, whenever I make an event on my Google Calendar, I like to go into the more options view, just so I can make sure that all of my settings are the way that I want them. So this shows the stuff I was already putting in. It has my name, has my time. I clicked that Join with Google Meet button. If I click this little drop-down menu there, here's where I see the information there on my Meet ID and my phone number. If I wanted to change my meeting ID to be one of those nicknames like what we talked about, to maybe where it's that one's already existing. All right, cool. Can't change it to that one. Someone already took that somewhere in the Googleverse. But it will put the information there so I can copy it. And then if you also click the question button by that Google Meet, it tells you a little bit more in-depth process for doing that. It takes you to the Help Center in Google, but sets it there so I can copy my join information. I can even add additional information below here. So if there's slides or resources I wanted to share in advance of the meeting, I can put them all here in my calendar event description. And if I add guests, maybe if I'm meeting with a couple of specific people, then I can share it with them and they would see all of this. Otherwise, if I just put that on my calendar, then the calendar event for this Google Meet is visible to me. But if I share the join information, then everyone else has that too.
Got it.
Are you a Google Calendar user, Scott?
I'm not, but I'm going to have to start to. I like all this, because transitioning is my hard part. I think we talked about the other day. Is I love, the Google stuff, Google Docs and all that, but I've used Word and Excel and I have all my old files in that. And so it's just transitioning is a kind of overwhelming.
It is. Baby steps.
Yeah. And I know what to do and I'm
built in a day.
use it. It's just that, it all work out's good though. I like this.
Calendar is one that, of all the tools that I like in G Suite, I use Calendar all the time because I like that I can add it to my phone. And so I see all of my stuff in a couple of different places so I don't forget. That's what all of these things are. I put all of our other trainings on here too. Good question.
If you set up a Google Meet on the calendar, kids can't get in there before you do, correct? You have to be in there for it to be open?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
And is there any way that the students, those who were present during the Google Meet, their attendance will be already like marked present or absent sort of thing in the spreadsheet, the Google spreadsheet?
There, I stumbled across a tweet or something the other day where I saw where someone had made some type of attendance sheet for that. There's not a feature built in automatically for that, but I'll do some digging because I saw something vaguely related to that, and I want to say maybe it was a Google Chrome extension that could take attendance for you, looking at all the people who were in your Meet call. There's not a built in automatically, but I can look into that because I'm almost 99% sure I read something about that, but I didn't look into it.
Thank you.
Mhm. All right. You have other questions, let me know. I will email everyone PGPs a little bit later today for being here for this. I know I went through that a little bit faster than the hour that we had scheduled.
I'm good. I think I just need to play around with it now. I'm going to schedule
Yeah.
one for tomorrow, so we'll give her a whirl.
Yep. And let me know if you need someone to drop in and be a student in the call, and you can practice that stuff too. I always join in on a phone or bother my husband for him to join in so I can test something for using
Okay.
the device. So,
All right. Thanks, Brittany.
yeah, thank you.
Brittany,
See you,
can I
Nick.
have another question?
It's down.